I think the title of today's video is going to be called Truth for Truth's Sake. Because I want to move on with my life. I think I want to start getting into game design. But as far as I'm concerned, conscious subjective experience is modeled, and it has been modeled for a few months now. The primary definitions, I only have two, I guess, or two assumptions that are being made. You are whatever your attention is on with respect to time. Your attention can be expressed as a ring. Some corollaries that can be based on these two assumptions. They're really not assumptions in my mind, but I'm getting ready to subject this to peer review, so we'll see. Corollaries are narcissism as human quantia, which is this idea that in order for humans to interpret reality, we have to essentially layer it into with a veil of narcissism just in order to begin to understand it. And then thoughts collapse much like a wave function. So one thought experiment that helped me get to that corollary was simply trying to imagine the task of, let's just say, trying to do addition between various examples, as well as trying to, say, remember a traumatic event. Almost certainly what has to happen at some level, unless you are able to break your brain down into multiple parts physically, is you basically have to stop thought in one category and switch over to the other. And in order to continue these various independent processes, you essentially have to stop thinking about one or the in order to get to the other. Now, one area where that gets somewhat interesting is where your limbic system is essentially engaged. So, for instance, think about the example of, instead of trying to do math and some other cognitive function internally, we can kind of see that as internal cognitive functions trying to think in the prefrontal. Instead, replace one of those examples with a limbic task such as driving. I mean, how often is it the case where we can essentially drive on autopilot and not remember what we've done on the road? Understand that limbic system is essentially a list of behaviors that's survivally, so to speak, responding to the outside world. And that's why you're essentially able to do things like add things up, have memories, reflect on those memories, yada yada, whilst driving. Okay, this is essentially what we're talking about when we say things like thoughts collapse the wave function or the Schrodinger equation. This is nothing fancy. This is essentially saying, like, your human particles are having an experience. Well, no shit, you know? So, you are whatever your attention is on with respect to space and time, and I guess that's just the only assumption that really has to be made, or the jump that needs to be made for humans in order to start looking at themselves properly. The reason we have essentially these four interpretations of quantum physics is essentially because us, the observers, or whoever wants to do the observing, has gotten to the point where these systems that we're trying to observe, or these particles that we're trying to observe, are always affected by our observation. But wait, there's more. Apparently in our current understanding or frameworks of knowledge, simply by trying to entertain knowledge around the objects we are trying to understand and observe changes the outcome of said objects and things we're trying to observe and build knowledge around. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this, it's like man has this inherent problem of not being able to see itself in so many words, quite literally so many words. I mean, this problem has gotten so bad that some of us have started to consider the many worlds interpretation. And what a literal stretch of the imagination if something that helps you get out of bed is the many worlds interpretation. You know what I'm saying? So we really have got to get back on track in terms of looking at ourselves correctly and interpreting the data correctly, frankly. Because things like panpsychism, things like many worlds theory, this is junk knowledge. Like as Robert Moore would put it, we have gotten so deep into the magus sector or magus quadrant of the psyche that we have essentially not only made up a lot of our own systemic problems that we're clearly facing today, but we have made up so much weird magician shit, even in this academia, you know? So this really is a wholesale attempt, and a free one at that, to get human discourse back on track. Because we Westerners are seriously at the point where we're about to fuck it all up for ourselves, unfortunately. And we do that by, again, just, I want to make sure we express these ideas on YouTube up front, make sure it's free to everyone, because these kinds of ideas need to be. As I kind of look at it, this is essentially, there came a point in human history where there were essentially serfs of the land over there in Europe, and one way that the serfs had to free themselves from the monarchies of the day, or the kingship or the queenship or whatever the fuck, was to essentially print the Bible over and over. Now, the Bible and all of its faults was a very powerful tool that generated enough energy for the serfs of the land to at least free themselves from tyrannical draconian rule. And the Bible and all of its faults was one of man's earliest attempts, again, not the earliest, but one of their earliest attempts in just trying to swing the bat at truth and trying to swing human energy in a direction where it needed to go. Because ultimately what it finally realized was that just simply trying to farm human energy, simply trying to do non-human shit in order to obtain non-human goals, leads to a lot of human suffering. And for some reason, we as a species cannot get over this understandings and why we keep suffering and just making this shit up for ourselves. So, again, this is mathematically sound. Rings are proven, believe it or not. So what math likes to do is prove shit. And the way it knows it can prove shit is it only makes assumptions it knows it can make, such as the ones that give us unions, intersections, shit like that. Shit you can't really contest as an ape. When we start doing that, we build frameworks and understandings of mind that are sound. And not only when we start doing that, we realize that we're not inventing something at that point. We're honestly interpreting and writing down. Now, again, academia has gotten so fucking bad that we have entertained now modern ideas that maybe we should go to therapy for some of the most primal aggressions that we have been expressing since pre-civilization. That we are to interpret some of the modern interpretations of society and where we are now, and to somehow channel this aggression right back into society with a form of pills, a form of therapy, or a form of pathology. Do you guys see where I'm getting at? We have so many ways of just curbing the human experience that are fundamentally non-human, and as a byproduct, we Americans, in one instance of the spectrum, have decided to recreate the environments of Nazi Germany. And we have sold it to ourselves as a good idea to do so. And the fact that we can't even come to terms on what is going on right now within the Western states today isn't just a reflection of where our educational system is. It is a direct reflection of where our attentions are aligning as a culture. Do we not get that at this point? The reason we're so brainwashable, the reason we're so amenable, the reason where there's so much infighting in the Democratic Party, the reason the right's are basically a cult. Are we getting this yet? We are whatever our attention is on with respect to time and space. Okay? So, highly recommend you start looking at yourselves and others correctly before you die. Because if you don't, you're just going to be like a bunch of other sad apes who get to their various peaks in life and they ultimately realize that the trophies on their wall, or the life they had lived, or the things they had been doing, and the experiences they had and how they've treated others, wasn't just not how they didn't want to do it, but it was in direct opposite of their intentions and values all along. So, grab a mirror if you want to know the way forward, I guess. Thanks, folks. Consciousness is solved. Get over it.